Okay, finally, I got it up here. Good afternoon again for people who came late. First of all, let's see who I am. So this is me, Azmeer. Talking about myself, well, I've been doing many different things related to software, multimedia, development, things like that. Currently, I'm looking after the multimedia department of SLTC. This particular program, Art and Design, Fundamentals for Engineering Student, there is a reason why we are doing this as well. The reason being engineering. Being engineering student, you'll be looking at a lot of technical things, right? A lot of technical things is what your focus will be on. But bringing in artistic side, colors, for example, design fundamentals and things like that will certainly add a different dimension to your technical skills. Okay, so that's the plan here, bringing in the art side into your technicalities or your engineering discipline is what the plan is. So in this regard, if you look at as to why we are doing this and what are we going to do during this program, we'll be looking at components of design. I'll explain you what this means, and stuff like the difference between a circle and a rectangle, yellow versus red, shapes versus others. So you'll be going through lots of design fundamentals first. Why? Because when you understand the theory behind design, you will start an appreciation towards this, and hopefully you will apply some of these things in your engineering discipline as well, right? So essentially that will make you more creative, effective, successful, and attractive in your work. And why is that? Well, if your effort, if your design is beautiful apart from working functional, well, that of course will create a big difference in the others. Okay, let me get the presentation animated. Okay, I hope that is much clearer now. So great designers make a load of money. Let's see how it is. So, and what are we trying to achieve out of this entire program? We call it the learning outcomes. So first, we are looking at identification of basic design elements. So first we need to understand the elements. What are these design elements, right? That's number one. Number two, we look at design illustration, meaning after understanding the design elements, we try to use variety of tools to illustrate it. Now, in our case, we are using two very important tools. One is Adobe Photoshop. The other one is Adobe Illustrator. Now, although we are using, or I am using Adobe two tools, there are so many others available out there as well. There is Scribus, there is CorelDRAW, There is various other paid and unpaid open source kind of tools available as well. So no problem. You can use any tool your family, absolutely no problem. It's just that whatever the basic fundamentals we are learning, you should be able to do that using the tool of your choice. If you have Adobe Photoshop Illustrator, well, good, it's okay. If you have CorelDRAW, no problem. You can do that. CorelDRAW, Corel Photo Paint, no issue. The fundamentals are same, right? So you can use it very well. And then number 3, judge appropriate elements suitable for variety of purposes. What does that mean? Right? So depending on the situation, you pick up different elements, right? Say you want to design a postcard for the upcoming Valentine's Day, or maybe New Year's, or maybe birthday of someone, whatever it means. So what are the suitable elements to create this? What are the matching colors, and how do you cut and paste and remove unwanted things and whatnot? So if you are looking at a card, right? Let's say you want to design a book cover. What is the best tool to use? Or you want to design a magazine for your faculty or your team, or you want to make a product poster for your, let's say, symposium or exhibition or something like that. So what is the best tool to use? Should I use Illustrator? Should I use Photoshop? Should I use CorelDRAW? What is the best to use? What about a book where you are required to keep a consistent multi-page system, right? If you take a book, the pages must look the same as in design wise. Maybe the same for magazines also. Magazine pages should look the same, right? So what is the best tool to use? Shall I use Photoshop? Shall I use Illustrator? Or maybe if it is a multi-page thing, the best tool to use is InDesign, another Adobe tool. Or there is PageMaker. Then there are a few others, right? Ventura Publisher, things like that. So before you select which tool to use, you need to understand what kind of project I'm going to work on, right? So that's very important as well. Now, all in all, the best thing, or rather the final thing here, is to identify basic design fundamentals. Okay. So before we go into the next page, let me find out your experience in some of these tools, right? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 students here. Out of the 7, can you raise your hand and say any of you have used Adobe Photoshop before? Can you raise your hands? Or can you tell me in the chat, how many of you have used Photoshop before? Asini, have you used it before? Dineshi, Hirusha, Jayani, Kaumadi, Nudar, and Tarumi. Any of you have used Photoshop before? Are you in the class or not in the class? This is supposed to be an interactive class. So if you're not talking to me, I have to just wait and see when you will talk. So Hirusha has used. All right, good. Anybody else? So What does that mean? You have not used Photoshop before. So can you raise your hands if you have not used Photoshop? Photoshop පාවිච්චි කරලා නැති කට්ටිය මීට කලින් අත උස්සන්න බලන්න. Jan, Asini, okay. Others, Taramini, okay. All right, looks like most of you have not used Photoshop. Okay, good. Thank you very much. So I suppose you have not used Illustrator also then. Okay. So when I ask a question, I need feedback from you. So if you are not giving me feedback, that means I'm talking to myself. I'll stop the class. There's no point talking to myself. So please give me feedback when I'm asking you questions. Okay. So now I can pitch myself to see where you stand. Thank you very much for that feedback. Now, I said there is a lot of money to make, isn't it? How about looking at a video to understand whether this is the true scenario? Now, give me a second. Let me give you a link. Let me find your link. Okay, I just shared a link in the chat window. Have a look at it. I'll ask you some questions. Okay, once you're done watching it, please let me know in the chat saying done. Okay, so I'm going to wait until you finish and let me know you're done. Once you're done, please mention there. Fantastic. So what was the most expensive logo there and how did that happen? What do you think? We are talking $1 million here, right? And they also said that cost is not the design cost, isn't it? It's not just the design cost. It is also design plus rollout. So what do you mean by rollout? If you take the BP British Petroleum logo, they said it's about, painting their trucks, changing their business card to books, to boards, to everything else around the world, not just in UK, isn't it? Because it's a global company. They're based in UK, but their logo is used everywhere in the world. So they have to change everything, including their website to mobile app to everything. That is the cost, right? But of course, a big portion goes to the logo designer as well, whoever is a designer. Just wanted to show you that things like even designing a logo is a very expensive affair. If you notice, I think it was last year, even Sri Lanka Telecom went through a logo change, right? And there's a big Aho created here, people asking, why do we spend so much money on logo change and things like that? But well, I guess you understand, it's not just the logo that we are talking here. We are also talking rolling out. So logo designing is one cost, but giving it out, so many other things also, there is a cost involved. Right. Now, with that, let's look at art and design as a foundation, right? As a foundation. Now, talking of foundation, we say the art and design is the foundation of, or rather foundation as a visual medium, right? So we see things around us. We see a beautiful phone. What do you mean by a beautiful phone? Are you talking about the features that is in the phone, or are you looking at the outside looks of the phone? The curves, the angles, where the camera is placed and the switches, and how you feel when you press a button. Now, these are all visual fields, isn't it? It's a visual medium. So that's one thing. Or you take a water bottle, for example. Even a water bottle, there is a visual appeal. If the water bottle looks ugly, we might go for a good-looking water bottle. And you might think, okay, water bottle is a water bottle. Why worry? Well, there is always a visual appeal. If you look at a car, for example, how does the car look like? Outside is also a major selection criteria. Apart from the engine capacity, price, and everything else, how does it look like? Does it look like a sporty, cool car or very boring, old kind of car? Right? So the visual medium is very, very important. Whether we are talking of fine art, like art, or whether you're talking about a web design. In all these places, we are talking visual medium, and it's very, very important aspect. Right? Even in the unimportant things, we sort of expected. What do you mean by unimportant thing? Right? Look at this. These are everyday objects. You see it all the time, every day. The first one being the stop sign on the road, right? Now, if you start analyzing that, why it is a shape like that, right? Octagon shape. Why there is a white color border around this? Why is it red in the middle and white in the text? And if you can actually check the width of the letters and the width of the border, you will notice it's the same, right? Let's say, for example, the width of the T or the P, and then measure that around the shape, you will notice it is exactly the same, right? And the stop sign is in the exact middle of the circular object. And the pole is colored in black. On top of that, usually the red color is also a very special paint called the reflective paint. So in the night, even if there are no street lamps, it will reflect the light from the vehicle approaching the sign. So it's a special ink. Now, why that? Even for a boring stop sign, why are you worrying about all that? That's why we call it. It's important. The visual medium is important. So when you spend time on the right message, then the message becomes effective. If you look at the 3 buttons below, right? What do you think is the first button? And the second button and the third button? What do you think? What are those? Anybody? Please use a chat window or the mic to talk to me. What is the role or the reason for these 3 buttons, starting from the first one? What is the first button? Generally speaking, the first button is used as a messaging or email, right? It looks like a mail icon. So we can say, if you click that, it might allow you to send a mail. Now, why do I think that I can click it? I think I can click it. I don't know. I feel it's a button. Why? Did you notice at the bottom, there is a darker version of the same button color, right? Darker version of the button color. So it's acting like a shadow, isn't it? So now it looks like a popping out button. So I can click. I could click rather. So it's a clickable button. And if I click, it might send an email. That's the sort of understanding I have. Second one, maybe if I click, it might send a message, sort of a SMS or something, right? Message to the phone. Third one is an @ sign. Now, generally, you connect @ sign with the email address. So first and the last looks like we are talking email. And that also, we feel like pressing that. It looks like a button. All right. So what I want to say is that even if the thing is, boring, a day-to-day object, it still has a lot more when it comes to design. All right. What about these things you may have seen again on everyday objects, right? Do you know the meaning of these buttons? What is the meaning of the first one? Top left-hand corner. Anybody? Please talk to me or message me. What do you think is the first button? මේ පළවෙනි බටන් එක මොකක්ද? වම් පැත්තේ කෙළවර උඩ තියෙන බටන්. What does it do? What do you think it does? I will wait until you answer me.
Recording.
Okay, only one person is talking. Recording, very good. Yes. So that we generally use it for recording, isn't it? And the second one, others, please speak. What is the second button? Stop button, right? Asiri, correct. What about the next one? There is a little rectangle and a play button. What do you think he's doing? Oh, by the way, now who told you that it is a record button and the stop button and play button and all that? Nobody taught us, right? Maybe we clicked and found out this is what it does. Maybe it is very famous, so you don't need to learn. So, like for example, the third button can be pause and play. And here is go to the previous track. This is to play. This is for the next track. And this is fast, reverse, fast forward, pause. Right? Or this may be to go frame by frame or slowly going forward and things like that. Right? Now, even a very simple thing like this, if you ask a Japanese person, they will tell you the same answer like you gave. If you ask for an African person, same answer. American person, Asian person, same answer. Now, this is universal, isn't it? Universal. Now, universal being very good, because then you don't need to train anyone to say, okay, this is what it does. Right? This is what it does. Now, when you connect that to this, for example, this is a audio player, the old one called Winamp player, and look at the symbols again. You can see play and pause, stop, previous, next, and here, and if you look at this in detail, you will notice it looks like a 3D button, isn't it? It sort of gives you the feeling that it is actually a button. You can actually click. Now, these ones are buttons where you can drag up and down. And there's another button here. So if you don't know something, we could click and find out what happens. Now, pan, it says, wall, it says. So pan means move it to the left speaker and the right speaker. Volume is to increase the volume and decrease the volume. Now, volume has only one line here, whereas a pan has a middle line also. So you are in the middle. You can either go to the left or the right by moving up or down. And this speaker here probably to cancel the sound. So you can stop the sound. Although it is playing, you're not pausing, you're stopping the sound. Maybe you want to play something else, right? And then here is the position of the track. So you are in the beginning of the soundtrack. Maybe when you push it further down, you might see in the middle and also towards the end. So what I'm saying is visual communication without any words is also extremely important. And this is the job of the designer. Right? So the designer decides what is the most appropriate universal symbol. Rather than using custom symbol, they are using universally accepted symbols here, which is very, very important. Which brings us to this slide here. What does it say? It says, design speaks louder than the words. Design speaks louder than words. Now, what does that mean? So if you have words, you are saying something. You're talking. The message is talking to you with the words the message has. But some messages doesn't have words. Some designs does not have words, but they're still talking to us. So what it says is that kind of design are more important, or rather talk louder than the words. So let's find out whether it is true. Okay. Now, in order to get to that, we need to first figure out the graphic elements. What do you mean by graphic elements? Let's look at this poster here. This is made out of very basic elements, right? Now, by looking at the left-hand side of the screen, you can tell a lot of things. Like what? This is an orange juice with ice in it. How did I say that? Right? I didn't even read these things on the right-hand side. I just looked at it. I realized this looks like a orange or a lemon piece, and this is brownish. So I assume this is orange juice. And I also see some blocks here, and they have certain transparency in it. So I assume they are ice cubes. So I assume this is a iced orange juice. But now I start reading the text. It says classic sun tea. Oh, this is not orange juice, so this is tea. Then it says put 8 tea bags into a clean glass 1-gallon container, fill with water and seal, place outside in direct sunlight for 3 to 5 hours until tea is desired strength, cool and enjoy. So it looks like making sun tea, right? Now I will figure out, okay, so it's actually not orange color, it looks like the tea color. But you see the message, even without reading any of the right-hand side, I assumed certain things. So there was a message in it. I very correctly figured out these are ice cubes. This is some sort of a juice. And this is a maybe orange or a lemon or something like that. Yeah. All that through very basic objects. These are rounded rectangles. These are odd shapes, right? These are triangles in a circle. Very basic shapes, right? How about this design? On the left hand side, we have a business card. On the right hand side, looks like we have a mobile application, right? So what does it do? What does it actually say? Now, on the left hand side, if you take the business card, again, it is made out of very basic components, isn't it? Again, we see lines, we see circles, and we can see they are interconnecting, right? And then also colors are also sort of mixed and matched. And it says snip cut, hair studio. And then we see pair of scissors. So it looks like something to do with cutting. And then since we start reading the word, we realize, oh, it's a hair salon. It's a place to get a haircut, right? So that's the business card. And did you see the notch at the bottom right-hand side corner? So that shows that this is a sort of a cardboard where you can bend it and take it away and things like that. Now let's look at the mobile application. Now there again, we see a big rectangle on the top and it says snip cut, hair studio. And then we see 3 buttons. We see a black button with a arrow pointing down. We see 2 green buttons, stylist and location. And what is the story here? The story is that you have clicked on the services button, and now since the array is pointing down, it is showing something related to the services. So it looks like women's cut, men's cut, full color. And then in front of that, there it says book. So it looks like this mobile app is showing us the services available from the salon. And if I want to book something, I just click the orange button, right? Now, the big story, it's a big story, isn't it? Was told without very explicit messages. We look at the objects on the screen, we figure out the story, we figure out the message. And if you start putting some effort to understand, you notice there is a consistency. So the green buttons are not selected yet. The orange buttons are, to book, they do the same function. So a lot of stories here. So we are having this consistency. Buttons and objects that are sitting close to each other has a big meaning, big story to tell. So who decided that it goes like that? Not the program. It is the designer who decided these things, right? Somebody had to sit down and start thinking, hey, how do I make it consistent? So that somebody was a designer. Right, which brings us to the basic elements, design elements, right? These are the basic design elements: line, shape, form, and texture. These are called the 4 most basic design elements. Now, the diagram shows the fact that, okay, here is a line, here is a shape, a triangular is a shape, And then a form, okay, it looks like a circle, but if you notice carefully, you notice there are some reflective lights and then there is also some shadows here. So it looks like a sphere, isn't it? A ball, maybe. So that's called a form. And the last one looks like it has some concrete in it. So that is called a texture. Texture has a concrete or a wooden or cement or whatever, right? So these are called the basic elements. The basic elements. Let's start with the first one, line. What do you mean by a line? A line is a shape that connects two or more points. It can be fat, it can be thin, wavy, jagged, anything. So this is our first design element. Now here is an example of a line, right? So line has a starting point and an ending point. What can you do with lines? Oh, look at this. This looks like a CV, this looks like a website, homepage, whatever. But the whole thing is created using lines, right? So the whole thing is created using lines, including the face, including the background. What about the letters? Well, even the letters are created with lines. Do you agree? The font, for example, is also created using lines. So the line can be straight or curved. It can, used to do various things like what we saw, the diagrams, some organizational charts, decoration, stuff like that. So what does the line do? It guides the reader's eye from one element to the next element. That is what the line do. It is guiding the reader's eye, right? Now here's another example of lines. Using lines, they've created a organization chart. Now, with our previous knowledge, we know we have to start from the top and we need to come down. So Melissa Ramos is the top person, owner CEO, and under Melissa, there are 3 roles. And under the first layer, you get the people who are working for these managers. All right. Now, all that are not spoken, isn't it? We have given them as a hint. So by looking at the top line, we know, okay, this is the big boss. Then we have a second tier and then the third tier. Tier being a position where more people can do the same job. And if you notice carefully, we are using lines to connect these boxes, rectangles, and also there is a box underneath, right, giving us a shadow. So the line can have weight, color, texture, and style like this. So weight means what? Thickness of the line. It can be thin line, medium thickness, large thickness, things like that. It can have any color you want. Red, green, yellow, orange color, whatever. Third one is the texture that we saw previously, right? Texture can have a feeling to the, let's say, hand. When you feel certain textures, we can say, well, it's not smooth, it's rough, or maybe it's not rough, it's so whatever, right? So the lines can have a texture as well. And then, of course, the style, right? It has a style as well. Now, I told you, most of these things are already there around us and we don't pay attention to understand these are design elements. We generally don't do that, right? Now, here is a perfect example. Now, look at this text here. Now, these texts are made out of line. Do you agree? You see, line from here to here to here, and here to here. Even a circle, right, are lines. So we told him to start as a kid. We told the kid to start from somewhere here and take your pencil, go around and then come back. Or here we said, okay, start here, go up, stop there, and then from top to bottom, you can come and then bottom to top. How about this one? In this example, we are using lines to design something, right? Just lines. Now you can see triangles are here. Then you can see a semicircle is here. Then you see certain odd shapes, objects. So what is this? What do you think is this? And is it evening or morning? So what do you think is this? Is it a sunset or a sunrise? How many of you think this is a morning picture? Raise your hand, please. How many of you think this is a morning picture? Now, what happens is we generally connect this into pictures we have seen before. So normally it is a sunset that we see coconut trees and sun and clouds and things like that in the evening. Now, by looking at this, we try to connect this into our previous learning. So we assume the blue color ones are water, and this is a coconut tree. There is also cloud behind it. And then these are stones, right? And then behind that is the sun. Okay. So that's about the line. Now let's look at the next one. Shape. What do you mean by a shape? A shape is any two-dimensional area with a recognizable boundary. Any two-dimensional area. So it can be a circle, it can be square, triangle, whatever. But it has a recognizable boundary. That's the challenge here. Here are some examples. Starting from a circle, right? So we start here and then it goes around and comes back. And then we have a boundary. So with the boundary, we can do things like outside the boundary, inside the boundary. So whatever you want to do, you use that boundary as a guideline. And then talking of shapes, there are two kinds. Some are called geometric shapes, others are called organic shapes. Geometric shapes are regular and predictable, whereas the organic shapes are more free form, like this. Here we have geometric, here we have organic. So what does the shape give us? It's a vital part of communicating, isn't it? It's a very, very important thing. Now, going back to our first slide, we noticed there was a octagonal shape with a stop sign. So that was the shape. Around the world, that is what they use it for, stop signs. And then it also gives us images. Of course, it gives us the weight and make it recognizable. And that is how we understand our usual street signs. Yeah. And also, if you look at the right-hand side, this is called abstract art. And if you look carefully, you see all very basic shapes. Ellipses, circles, rectangles, and then very nice color combination. Very carefully selected color combination is also there. Right? So all that thanks to shape. Now, if I ask you, what is this picture about? What do you think? What is the picture here? What do you think about that? It looks like a girl, isn't it? The black color shape can be hair. And there are two eyes, and then there is lips. I don't see the nose, but I see a ear. And then there is a neck, then there is a gown, right? So it looks like a girl here. Okay. So what does a shape do? Well, it organizes or separate content. It also allows you to create simple illustrations. And more than anything, it will add interest to your work, right? And again, like the previous one, this is the foundation of complex activities. I'm going to give you, at the end of it, I'll give it to you. Maybe I can upload this to our Moodle, some exercises where, because some people might think, well, I can't draw, I'm not an artist. Well, not really, anyone can draw, right? So to do that, I'll share a document with you where you can start adding things into it, right? That's called fake face. And then some more exercises towards the end, because in order to evaluate your unit here, you do know you're getting credit for this, right? You will be given around 5 exercises. Make sure you do these 5 exercises and keep with you, right? So it's not a very difficult one. You just create things like a card and stuff like that for yourself or to your friend, your family, whatever. So you create that, keep it yourself, and then you can use that as a project in your submission, right? Okay, our third object here is called form. What does that mean? A form. A form is where a shape is taking 3 dimensions, right? 3 dimensions. Is that even possible? Yeah, you can. By very carefully looking at the light direction and shadows, you can convert any 2-dimension object into a 3-dimension object. You can do, right? Look at this diagram here. This is a real picture of some concrete structure, right? Now, if I bring that to artistic form, how can I give it depth? How can I show the texture here? You can. Look at this. We've drawn the same thing using very basic shapes, but here we are also giving multiple shading algorithms so that the person can choose what he does best. All right. And those lines are called the perspective drawing lines. We'll learn that later. That also gives a certain reality to our object that we are drawing. Here's another example. So this looks like a red color, a bouncing ball. And if you look at it very carefully, you will notice there is a reflection here, then there is a darkness here. And then if you look very carefully, you can see this is actually not floating. It is on top of some other objects, maybe a table or something, right? You notice it is realistically looking. So because we brought in some 3 dimension into the picture. And now comes the form, right? So what does that form mean? The definition is make up a variety of things, include sculptures. They give a certain depth and realization or realism to our 2D objects, as you can see from here. So it gives much more boost to our 2D things. So even images that are less realistic, you can give some realism using basic things like shadows and whatnot, right? So you can do it. Now here's another very good example of using shadows in the most appropriate places. Now this is a basic menu, right? Do you notice in the middle, there is a line going in, and then that is dividing the colors of the paper and the logo and the cup into 2 different areas. Right? That is because they wanted to give a depth feeling to the customer. That's why right-hand side is a little darker than the left-hand side. It is still a flat piece of paper. Okay. And our last one is texture. What does that mean? Texture. It is part of the 3D environment or the 3D object. It is difficult to express actually the texture part. But if you take the right photograph, right sort of light angles, you can do it. You can fake the object's 3D ability. Right? So here's an example of texture. So this is a photograph, and this is the drawing of that photograph. Now, you don't see one-to-one here because these are outline photographs. Now there's a finger here. So it sort of implies that if you touch it, you will get hurt by the thorns in it. So that's what the message says. What about this one here? What about the road? I mean, a wall and the place here. What have they done? So if you look at it carefully, you'll notice this is a fireplace, isn't it? There is a wooden rack here. This is made out of bricks. maybe granite. And then this is a skin on a wooden floor, perhaps. This is maybe a bear, right? Skin of a dead bear. So that is the kind of story we can make out of very basic shapes. These are very basic shapes, right? So a couple of things we need to remember, especially when it comes to texture, is not to use too much, right? What do you mean by that? Now look at this example here. I have a nice texture, bluish, greenish background here. It looks okay. But look at the same thing here after applying some textures. Well, it's graphically very advanced, but is it visually accepting? Maybe not, right? So the rule of thumb is don't overuse it. Don't sort of overuse it, then you will have trouble there. Now, we spend time talking about the principles of design, or rather the elements, isn't it? Now, how do you bring in these elements together in order to create a design is what we are going to look at now. So when you bring in these elements, look at the principles here, how you use them. Number one is balance, emphasis, movement, pattern, repetition, proportion, rhythm, variety, and unity. So don't worry about these words. They are big words, but we need to know that these are the areas we will be working on. They're not very difficult, right? So once you learn it, you will remember what is going on and what we are talking about here. So let's start with the balance. Equal distribution of visual weight. Remember, visual weight. What do you mean by visual weight? What goes into where? And is it balanced? Right? When it comes to visual balance, we talk about color, we talk about size, we talk about numbers, we talk about negative space. Let's see what it means by these things. So the balance is the act of comparing or estimating two things. We say balance. They are balanced or they are not balanced. So when it comes to design, we are comparing empty space, that we call white space, versus content space, where you have something. We also compare text and images. We also compare colors and no colors in a design, right? And generally we use flat colors from China or India to compare whatever you use. Here's an example. So in this example, on the left we have a big box. On the right we have 4 boxes, but pay attention, this line here. See, it's nicely aligning these lines. And if you check, the space between these and these are exactly the same. Exactly the same. Here's another one, a magazine. On the magazine, on the right-hand side, they want to have a big picture and then maybe some more text. But this person has decided to use the right-hand side page fully for an introduction picture, and the left-hand side fully in a very controlled environment to give the minimum information, right? World most beautiful beaches, and then you need to go further down to understand the cost. When are they going? So this looks like a tour operator, right? All that is coming later. And talking of balance, we have symmetrical balance and asymmetrical balance. So symmetrical balance is where you have same thing on both sides, like in this case, XO, XO. You can perfectly divide it and they are nicely balancing for both sides. These are examples, like symmetrical balance. Another example. What do you mean by asymmetrical balance? Well, things are still balanced. They are still evenly distributed, but look at this one. We are not using the same objects to balance, right? Now here we have a rectangle with some text. On the right hand side, we have text, but they are nothing to do with the box here. But look carefully. Look at the line here. Look at the line here. Look at the space. Right? So looks like this is a very carefully thought after design, but you see the balance still, right? You still see the balance there. Here's another asymmetrical balance example. Right? So when it comes to balance, there is also this thing called the rule of thirds. You may have seen this in your mobile phone when you turn on the camera. Sometimes you turn it off, but sometimes it is on. So what does this mean? This means if you use the rule of third, you can make some great designs, whether it is a photograph or whether it is some design you're working on. So what does rule of thumb means? Rule of third mean? You break your area into 3x3 grid, whether it is camera, whether it is paper design, whatever. Right? As an example, look at this. This is called 3x3 grid. And if you take a photograph like this, where the vase is in the 1/3 line, right? You might have a very good response to this design. Because people like to see this in the asymmetric world. Okay. People would like to see asymmetric things in a grid like this. Then they say, hey, that's very nice. Right? So why is that important? Well, according to the studies, scientists have found out our eye goes from top to bottom and left to right. So this is why, I guess you will know now, people arrange tables, people arrange various things so that it's given balance. Next one is called the negative space balance. Now, what does that mean? Look at this logo here. This is the Pittsburgh Zoo. Right now, by looking at it, you realize there is a tree there, isn't it? But look, there is an ape here on the left-hand side. There is a tiger or a lion on the right-hand side. Did you notice? There is some fish here, dolphins jumping. So negative space is also another very important aspect where you can use it very effectively, very creatively to show your logo powers. Here's another one, another couple, right? The logo called snake, there is a snake here. Did you notice? And mouse, we said you can go to mouse, but don't buy a mouse. But then this shows what else do they have, right? The mouse. And the last one here is silk skin. So this, if you notice again, these are two legs, right? Two legs. And it's a skin care. So we can see very smooth legs here, right? And it's part of the logo. Now that is called negative space. Look at this one. It says paint city. So this is a paint bucket. And you are painting. You painted the walls here, or the sky here in this case. And then instantly becomes a paint supplier to the nation. Same for the others as well. Now, if you look at this design, here we use something called emphasis. What do you mean by emphasis? We are emphasizing something in the design so that people get the message first. Now, if you look at the topic of this book, it says solar mapping, right? So instead of using a O for the solar, they have used the picture of a sun, right? So now we are giving a message also. This is something to do with solar, right? So that's how you use the emphasis. So what does that mean? Part of the design that catches the eyes of the viewer or the viewer's attention. So it can be size, color, texture, shape, anything. And the other one is movement. Now hold on. How can you show movement in a picture? Because picture is a picture, it's not animated. Yes, you can by using curved or we call it fuzzy lines. Now look at this here. We have circles, right? We have circles of lines. We can say motion. So there is a swan here, and the swan is sort of moving the water, right? And then the pattern, repetition of something. So here's a pattern, right? That is also a design, right? Same simple pattern is repeated all over the place. Here's another one, not a very simple pattern, but we see some sort of a repetition. We see some shirts and other clothing having patterns like this. They are all repeating patterns, by the way. Here's another repeating pattern. Another one. Right? So some more odd ones. Okay, now here is something called the Islamic geometrical patterns. You see these things in mosques or in Arabic art. They're very nicely balanced, repeatable shapes. So here's an example of a very complex mosque having those repeatable patterns. And then proportion, what does that mean? Proportion is a kind of a feeling to understand the size of something. Now look at that. We can, when you are drawing a tree and a house, this is how you usually draw, isn't it? So we have a proportion for the house, proportion for the tree. So what it says is the tree is larger than the house. That's what it says. What about this one here? Very cunningly use lines and proportions. So here it's bowling, isn't it? So we see the ball, the man, and the target here. And then on a line, and the line is directing to the target, right? All these are very simple shapes, but has a very big meaning, very big story behind that. And then what do you mean by rhythm?
repeatedly to create a certain feeling again. Right? Now here are some examples: repetition, pattern, flowing rhythm. Right? When you combine the repetition and pattern, you see a flowing rhythm. It's like a mountain or a jungle or something like that. Right? So you need some sort of a variety to make sure it is good rhythm. Here's a book cover, maybe using rhythm. Right? Looks very rich, isn't it? It creates a mood. That's what it says. Now look at this design very carefully. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 strips are there. And if you are careful to look through the strips, you will find out there are few faces here, isn't it? There are two faces, in fact. One face with these two eyes looking to the left, and another one with these two eyes looking to the right. Right? Very nicely created design. And then what do you mean by variety? We already saw what variety is. Variety is where you bring in some sort of a design change so that it's not boring. Now here is an apple in a very different way to illustrate an apple, isn't it? Very different way to illustrate an apple. Here is a design where we bring in variety. It's a Pizza Hut, pizza advertisement. Very, very basic shapes are used. Right? Another one. You can see semi-transparent colors as well. Buildings are there, and some buildings you can identify. Right? New York, for example. And then unity. What is unity? The correct balance. That is unity. Here are some logos showing unity here. You can see approximation, you can see symmetry here, you can see balancing, you can see progressing. All that gives us something called the unity. Is another one. Right? So this also can be a book cover or a magazine cover, a website logo, whatever. And if you look closely, you notice there are gears here. Right? So it is in gear clocks or gears in clock. Right? And it has a very subtle gear setup in the background. Very nicely designed. And the colors are in a very harmonious way. Right? Not disturbing the message. All right, which brings us to the summary of today. Right now, what I wanted to do today was to basically give you an introduction as to why, as engineering students, technical student, learning something nothing to do with engineering here. But we realize creativity is extremely important even when you are doing technical subjects. So in doing so, I wanted to start with the very basic elements. Right? Very basic elements. And we looked at lots of different things. We looked at the foundation of design. We looked at the elements. We looked at how they use it together, use it separately, and make patterns out of that. All those things we discussed today. Okay. So this foundation knowledge is very important before we jump into a tool like Photoshop or Illustrator. So I hope we looked at the fundamentals, the basics of design, so that next time we can apply it for a major design. Now here is a sample again, combining everything we learned today. You see, it's a shape. You can see, we know it's a tape, isn't it? It's taped to a wall. How do you know it is a wall? Because it's a texture. Then there is a shape, it looks like a poster or something, right? Now that also is nicely aligned, isn't it? So there is a form, there is balance, there is texture, then there is a line. And let me show you this again from my first slide. What does this say? Or this said before? Design speak louder than words. Now, do you agree? More than the words, our design, if you very well design it, you can have a much bigger message than the text message itself, right? So I guess now this is much more clearer than what we saw it first time. The design speaks louder. All right. Now let me share some files with you. I still need to organize the Moodle. I will upload some files there. So what I want you to do is to download that, do some sketching, and next time when we come to the class, I would like you to show it to me on the computer so that we can have a look at that and discuss that. By the way, these are the two recommended books for this unit: Visual Design Fundamentals and also Letterhead and Logo Design. I think I have the PDF version, so I will upload that to Moodle so that you can download it next time during the class. Any questions? Any questions? No? No questions? All right, so I guess I'm done for today. Couldn't do some exercises, but I'll upload that to Moodle so that next time we'll be able to do some hands-on work. Okay, so have a good week, and I shall talk to you next Monday.